And welcome to a new edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast here on STLSportsPage.com. Rob Reigns along with Mike Reigns. We're going to keep you entertained here for a few minutes and talk about everything that the Cardinals have done in the last week.
Okay, you can turn it off. That was it.
Into the show. Bye. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. No, we're just kidding. Of course, the Cardinals did wrap up the winter warm-up. Had some, a lot of activity down at the ballpark last weekend, and then Hall of Fame vote came out. We're going to discuss both those things and look ahead a little bit to spring training now that we're counting down the actual days. Less than a month away till we get to spring training, so I'll be here before we know it. Obviously, a lot of questions to be answered, but let's kind of go back a little bit and talk about the winter warm-up first of all. And I think, obviously one of the two different parts of it, the kind of fan involvement with the different exhibits that they have, all those 3 days down at the ballpark in the ballpark village, the autograph signings, and then kind of the presentations and stuff. And I think by and large, seemed like crowds were down a little bit, but I think people who came and braved the weather probably still had a pretty good time. From a media standpoint, I think the most interesting thing, the comments made by John Mozeliak, the president of baseball operations, as well as Bill DeWitt Jr. and Bill DeWitt III in their separate sessions with the media. And they also, of course, took turns in answering questions from the fans. But topic A, as it has been since October, is what are they going to do with Nolan Arenado? I mean, it's the question the fans asked at Mozeliak the warm-up. It was questions the media asked. And unfortunately, right now, they still have no answers.
Well, Mo did say priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3 is to trade Nolan Arenado. And I think in saying that, he's kind of backed himself in a corner now because not a lot of people want him. So what's going to happen now? And, as we sit here today, he probably is on the roster starting spring training. And what does that look like now from the reset for the kids to play?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's what we just have to wait and see. I mean, it did say that the one thing that did kind of come out of it was that both Mozeliak and Bill DeWitt Jr. did say, when directly asked about the payroll for the year, that if they are not able to trade Arenado, does that mean they're going to have to trade somebody else, pivot and make a trade, probably a starting pitcher? And both of them said no, that they were not. There didn't be a number that they had to get to from a payroll standpoint, that they're okay now where they're at for where they want to be. So I think that's kind of good news in a sense. Is that He said, I don't want to kind of make a bad trade just to get to a certain number. And I took that as a positive sign. But saying that, my gut says they're still going to trade Nolan Arenado. I don't know how, I don't know who, but I think it's got to happen.
They're certainly going to try, right? The question is it worth making a trade that doesn't get the return that the Cardinals want just in order for Nolan Gorman to play third base? Is that worth it? Or is it worth holding on to him for a month into the season and then trying to trade him when things change based on how the season goes? At this point, I don't know that either one of those really you can't say yes or no to either one as which one makes more sense.
I mean, I guess the problem is if you could have a crystal ball and say that Nolan Arenado is going to come out in April and hit 400, 7 or 8 home runs and drive in a bunch of runs, then, obviously it becomes more of interest to other clubs. But if he comes out and plays April, May, and is hitting 200, what other clubs are going to try to trade for him at the deadline, and you're stuck with him at that point.
And I think because of the salary and who he is, you're stuck playing him. If he's here, he's playing third base. And so I think, when you look at Fangraphs put out a projection of who they think is going to be the starters, and as of right now, they've got him playing third base 91% of the time. So that's all statistics are pointing to him being here playing third base.
If he's here. I think what I think is going to happen, my own guess that I didn't get this from anybody at the warm-up. I didn't get it from anybody outside the organization. But to me, I think to make a deal happen, they're going to have to eat more of the contract than they thought they were going to have to. And that's the question, is how much is that going to be? And then if you're agreeing to eat more of the contract, does that mean maybe you can get a better prospect or two in return? That's I think what they're trying to do in any kind of deal. I mean, I think they like the way that the Houston trade set up. We don't know for sure who they were going to get in that trade. We've heard different rumors about which level prospects it was that they were getting back, and we know they were going to eat about $15 to $20 million of the contract. So I think that's the kind of deal they're trying to put together with somebody else. But as long as Bregman's still out there and has a sign too, it kind of is another fly in the ointment.
I was going to say, I think there's two things to look at. One is the Bregman situation, and the fact that he hasn't signed, I think, is slowing down the possibility of a trade for Arenado, right? Because where is he going to go? Where is he going to end up? And that's going to change a lot of the aspect of what a trade looks like or what the money looks like. And two, I think the fact that, the TV contract is locked in and set, the DeWitts have said, okay, we're all right with the salary where it's at. And I think that allows them to have a little bit more flexibility than they would have 3 months ago. 3 months ago it would have been, hey, we need to cut salary because we don't know what's going to happen on the money aspect of the TV contract. And I think knowing that now, they know, hey, we're okay where we are right now. So it allows them to eat some of Arenado's contract if they want to.
It's going to be fascinating to see what happens here between now and getting to Jupiter. I really think it's best for everybody involved. The ownership said it. Arenado hasn't talked, but his agent basically has said, we're trying to work out a deal somewhere else. So we'll have to see how that goes. The other thing I think that kind of came out of the winter warm-up was, usually all the players to come in and spend 20 minutes talking to the media at different points during the 3 days. We heard from a lot of those guys who were there over the weekend. And I was encouraged by the way that some of the younger guys talk. Donovan, Newtbar, Mason Wynn, Jordan Walker, they all seem very excited about where they are. Nolan Gorman was not at the warm-up. He was on his honeymoon. But they all seem to be happy with where they are in their own personal game and that they like the challenge. And they accepted the challenge of the young guys getting a chance to play and kind of showing that they can play and maybe proving some of the doubters wrong.
And I think what's interesting is when you look at the current team that we have, and everybody's, there's fans that are upset saying we're not trying, and people or the media is, maybe spinning it one way of saying, well, they're just throwing in the towel for this year. But I think a lot of the guys in the locker room are taking this as a challenge of, hey, I'm going to step up and show you that I can play, and we're going to compete, and we're going to put a winning ball club on the field. And listening to Jordan Walker and the way he was talking about how he's worked on his approach and his hitting, again, the key comes down to, are the Cardinals going to play them long enough to allow them to work through some of these learning curves? And if they do, I think this team can actually be a lot of fun to watch if they get back to some of the more fun aspects of the game.
And talk is cheap, too. I mean, like at this January, you can sort of do all the talking you want. But when you actually get into not only just in spring training, but when you get into the regular season, that's when you have to produce. That's when you have to prove that it's not just talk, that you actually can go out there and do it.
But I think if you asked most fans today, and would they rather watch Arenado hit a ground ball and jog his way to first, or watch Victor Scott hit a ground ball and sprint his way to first and beat out an infield single? I think a lot of guys would rather watch that game because the speed and the depth of the club is going to allow them to do some things the team last year couldn't do.
Yeah. And I think too they all talk like Newtbar said, we're going to come out and play with our hair on fire. And I think fans would respond to that. I really do. I mean, I think the DeWitts were talking about it with the whole reset mentality and what they're trying to do, and together the draft picks and build from within and develop players that they obviously want to develop their own players. And they basically said that it's a risk, but signing a guy for $200 million is a risk too. So it's a risk business, and I think that they think the fans will buy into it if the players play hard, if they hustle, and if they think they still have a chance to win. I think that's what they're counting on. They know the attendance projections are lower to start the season, but they hope the fans buy into it as the season goes along.
And I think, yes, these guys are young players, but there's guys that are in that locker room that are capable of hitting 20 and 30 home runs. That if Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman play like they're capable of playing, they could both hit you 20, 25 home runs, no problem. I think Newtbar is another guy, 20, 25 home runs. And then you got Wilson. And if Wilson is able to stay healthy at first base, again, 25, 30 home runs probably, right? So the offense is there, and then it allows guys like Donnie and, Victor Scott and Mason to just get on base.
This is Mike Raines here on the STLSportsPage.com podcast. Cart Raines on the Cardinals. And thanks to all of our sponsors, primarily our lead sponsor, Drury Hotels, Archwell Health, AAA Travel of Missouri. We appreciate all of their support, not only for the podcast, but all of our content here on STL Sports Page as we get ready to head down to spring training. All of our content, of course, no paywalls here. You'll get all the free reports and everything from spring training every day to keep you up to date on what's going on with the Cardinals. Well, actually, will be some news that we have to write about at that point when we get into spring training. But I think the other takeaway I had from the winter warm-up is the sessions that we had with Wilson Contreras and with Sonny Gray. Obviously, two guys that had no trade clauses like Arenado that could have decided that they wanted to opt out of those contracts and I think would have very easily been tradable players had they said, we want to go somewhere else. But they both told John Mozeliak that we want to stay here. We want to be a part of this. We believe in the young talent here. And I think that's the kind of leadership, too, especially Contreras seemed to say, that would have been the easy thing to do, to take a trade and go somewhere else. But I didn't want to do that. I like challenges. I don't like people doubting me. And I think he's going to accept that role of being the leader as he moves to first base. And I think he'll be, a very effective player. We'll see what kind of leader he really is.
Yeah, and I think the two of them are huge for this season, right? Because one, having a healthy Wilson Contreras does a lot in the middle of that lineup, right? Because last year this offense really struggled. Arenado and Goldie couldn't get it going, and Wilson was hurt half the time, right? And he was playing very well before he got hurt. So if he can stay healthy and stay in the game, that's the most important thing. And so his leadership of bringing these young kids up is going to help. And we've seen that in Donnie too. He's really stepped up and shown that he wants to be a leader here. And I think Sonny Gray and the pitching staff, there's a lot of question marks in this pitching staff. And so if Sonny can go out and be the number one and be the ace that you need him to be, because somebody's going to have to make up for the 4 and 5 on the starting rotation right now that is not going to be very good.
And Newbar also was saying, and I think he's right about this, is that the kids in the beach said, people act like I'm 35, so I'm 27. And they said, that it was harder, though, for those younger guys to kind of emerge and be a voice in the clubhouse and be a leadership role when you still had guys like Goldschmidt, and older guys around that club. You're only still a couple years away from Molina and Pujols being around, and I think it was, kind of now it is time for those guys to take that step. They learn from those guys. They know how to be a leader. They know that they're going to be talking to a lot of basically the players that are the same age or a little bit younger. And I think it's going to be easier for Newbar and Donovan and those guys to take that role, take on that.
And I think when you look at the clubhouse aspects, Goldie's a guy that's not going to be in your face. He's quiet, but he's going to be there to help you. And I think Wilson Contreras is the opposite. He's going to be in your face. He's going to be loud, and he's going to be intense. And so I think that may resonate differently with some of these kids this year than last year's team. And so I think you may see a different spark and a different hunger based on just the clubhouse atmosphere alone.
Well, we will see. Of course, the other big story in baseball that we want to get to here on the podcast this week was the Hall of Fame election announcement. The 3 new members going into the Hall of Fame voted in by the baseball writers, Ichiro Suzuki, CC Sabathia, both no doubters on their first year on the ballot. Billy Wagner, glad to see, finally snuck in on his 10th and final year of eligibility. All 3 very good choices. I think they'll join Dick Allen and Dave Parker, who voted in by the Veterans Committee in the Cooperstown class of 2025 up in Cooperstown. And congratulations to all of them. Of course, no real Cardinal connection to any of them except facing them all of these different years, but very happy for all 3 of those. The one Cardinal connection to the Hall of Fame vote was Carlos Beltran, the former Cardinal outfielder who got close, I think 35, something like that votes. I don't remember off the top of my head that he was short of election, which means he and Andrew Jones should both have a real good shot at getting in next year, because next year, of course, there's not a lot of great first-year candidates like there were with Ichiro and CC Sabathia. Ichiro 1 vote shy of getting the unanimous vote. It wasn't me.
I will say this. You've had a vote for a long time, but whoever did not vote for Ichiro should not have a vote again.
I understand. I wonder if the same guy didn't vote for Jeter.
It doesn't make any sense to me, because
it hasn't.
Ichiro came over when he was 27 and still had 3,089 hits. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Mm-hmm. And he still played a long time. He played until he was 40, but he came over here early and didn't play in Japan. There's no question in my mind he'd be the all-time hits leader. Yeah. Maybe on base percentage. I mean, he was just an incredible player.
Yeah, he was. And there's no doubt, I think the whole percentage thing is kind of interesting, because it's like, they don't put the percentage on their plaque. So, once you're in the Hall of Fame, you're in the Hall of Fame. And I do think there's something significant about being a first ballot Hall of Famer. Obviously, it would be important to be a unanimous pick. It's never happened. The only guy that's been a unanimous pick was Mariano Rivera. It's never been a position player. Speculation now that the first could be Albert Pujols.
I was going to say Albert's going to be close, but if one guy can't vote for Ichiro, maybe he won't vote for Albert. I don't understand it. But
the Hall of Fame asks writers when they vote, when you fill out your ballot and submit it to the Hall of Fame, if you want your vote to be made public. You have that option. The Baseball Writers Association has tried to get the Hall of Fame to make they're not asked that question, just to say that as an agreement for voting, your vote will be made public. But the Hall of Fame to this point has not done that. The voters who do elect to let their ballots be public, that'll be announced, I think it's on February 4th. It's in a couple of weeks after the election is official and announced. But whether that one writer who did not vote for Ichiro will be made public or not, we don't know.
The question is, if you're voting for something, you most likely have a reason you're voting the way that you are. Mm-hmm. So where's the problem in making that vote public? Right. because
There's not, shouldn't be.
you should be able to defend your reasoning if you feel like you voted this way for a certain reason. Right? I mean, you can say the reasons you voted for Roger Clemens or didn't vote for Roger Clemens every year, right?
Right.
So
I think it's going to be interesting to see if that candidate does come out and what his reasoning was for not voting for Ichiro. The only explanation, there's only two possible explanations, or three possible explanations. One, it was just an oversight. You just accidentally didn't check the box. It happens.
on a Hall of Fame ballot,
It happens. I mean, you don't know. I mean,
I rest my case again. He shouldn't have a vote if he can't tell that he's checking Ichiro's name or not.
Okay, I'm saying that's a pretty weak excuse. I'm saying that would be a potentially excuse that he didn't intentionally slight Ichiro. It just was a mistake. Number two is there is one rule in the Hall of Fame balloting. You can vote for no more than 10 candidates. I'm more of a small hall person myself. I've never voted for that many, so I've never been a problem. But the one explanation that maybe makes a little bit of sense is if you had somebody that you wanted to vote for, a down ballot candidate that you knew was not going to get another, a lot of votes. Ichiro is going into the Hall of Fame, so if you don't vote for him, it's not going to hurt him in terms of being selected in the Hall of Fame. So I'm not saying that that's a right or wrong reason either, but I'm saying it is another possible excuse or explanation that voter could make. The third being, and there's some people who hold to this theory too, that they don't vote for anybody the first year that they're on the Hall of Fame ballot. And so
whether you're a Hall of Famer or not, it shouldn't matter how many years you're on the ballot or not.
Are you
capable of playing and being in the Hall of Fame? Yes or no?
I do think that there is something special about going on the first ballot. Now, I'm not saying that there, and I think there probably are. I'd have to go back and look. I probably have the guys that I did not vote for the first year they were on the ballot that I ended up voting for later on. I can tell you one of them was Carlos Beltran. And the reason for that being that I thought that, obviously there were some scandals involved with Beltran at the toward end of his career with the Astros and the sign stealing, all that kind of stuff. The one penalty that the writers can impose on a player is to delay his selection to the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's kind of the penance or whatever that if you could put it on him for that, for being involved in that, it's not going to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. He's going to go in probably next year, and he still has a lot of years left on the ballot. If for some reason he falls a few votes short next year, but that's so.
And I get
maybe it's a guy that just doesn't ever vote for anybody on the first ballot.
And I get that sometimes it's one of those of who he's up against, right? Because there's other people that are trying to get him that year. Do you think there should be a limit of 10 that you can vote for?
It's never been a problem for me because I've never had to vote for that many. So I don't have a problem with that. Some writers do. Those are the ones who subscribe to the big hall theory that a lot more people in the Hall of Fame. I think a class of 2 or 3 every year is just fine.
That's what makes it the Hall of Fame, right? It makes it hard to get in, right?
It's not the Hall of Very Good. It's the Hall of Fame. So I think that's something. But anyway, that's always a topic of debate, and it's always an interesting thing. I voted for 6 people. I voted for the 3 that got in. I voted for Carlos Beltran and Andrew Jones, who I think will go in next year. And my other vote went to Mark Burley, the St. Louis area product, who has had a very good career. I think he's probably a little bit short of the Hall of Fame, but again, some of those times, the other part of the Hall of Fame ballot, I should say that maybe this is a factor, part of the reason for that, how that vote went. We don't know. We don't know what the ballot, who else he voted for or didn't vote for on that ballot. You have to get 5% of the vote to stay on the ballot. And that was the reason, if you remember a year ago, I voted for Matt Holliday, even though I didn't think he probably was a great Hall of Fame candidate, certainly not on the first ballot, but I also knew he was going to be a guy that struggled to get to that 5% mark. And we saw it happen with Jim Edmonds. We saw it happen with Ted Simmons, that they got knocked off the ballot after their first year because they didn't get to the 5%. And Simmons eventually got into the Hall of Fame, through the Veterans Committee, which is going to be the path that Edmonds has to follow if he's going to get there. But that was my reason for voting for Holliday, and he didn't get there. He fell short, so he didn't get to the 5%. But maybe there was a guy he wanted to vote for that he was worried about getting the 5%, so he voted for him instead of Ichiro. I don't know.
I'll be curious to see who it is and if there's a reasoning when it comes out.
So flipping the calendar, though, now that we get past those couple of things, now you're getting ready to kind of count down towards spring training, and we get less than a month away now. A lot of the pitchers and catchers, will be reporting on February 12th. A lot of the guys are already down there, especially ones who kind of work out there year-round or in the off-season, are already getting some time in. A lot of the guys at the warm-up were leaving there to head toward Florida. So if we fast forward to spring training, what is the biggest question or the thing you're looking forward most to seeing when we get down to June?
I've got a few question marks, and I'm not really sure which one weighs higher, right? So the first one I'll say is the back half of the starting rotation. Who gets that role and who fills that 3, 4, 5 role? Because right now you can probably safely assume that Sonny Gray, Eric Fetty, Miles Michaelis are locked into your 1, 2, 3. Your 4 and 5, is it going to be Matz? Is it going to be Palante? Is it going to be the kids in McGreevy? Is it going to be, Gordon Rosefo? I'm really curious to see kind of how that works out. And within that, one, which Miles Michaelis shows up? Is it the Miles Michaelis of 3-4 years ago that was really good and held us down? Or was it Miles Michaelis last year with a 10+ ERA? And I think that's going to be a big question mark of this rotation, right? And so that's one question to me, is just the starting rotation in general. Of when they say they're going to reset, are they going to give the kids starts? Because Michael McGreevy did everything that he could have in his 2 starts last year and didn't get any more starts. So are they going to let the pitchers pitch and let them do their thing?
I want to see Gorman and Walker. I want to see what work they put in over the winter, if they can see any immediate results of what they did, how they changed it, how the new hitting coach Brant Brown has already kind of started working with them, trying to help them out. So I want to see that, and I want to see how the playing time in center field is split up between Michael Ciani and Victor Scott II. I'm curious to see how that works.
Yeah, that was my second question. I was going to say my second question is Victor Scott and Ciani, who wins that battle? And then I think the third question mark you got to look at is, if Arenado's still here, Gorman or Sajaci, who wins out for that battle? Because it's going to come down to one or the other probably, right? And I think right now they want to try to play Gorman at third base. Well, if Arenado's still here, you got to play Gorman at second. And is Gorman going to play better than Sajaci? And Sajaci just almost hit 400 in the fall.
And also Donovan then gets bumped to left field, and in that scenario, which means Newpar probably moves to center, which again takes Victor Scott and Michael Ciani out of things. So that's why I say there's a domino effect of all of those different moves that we're going to have to see. The other thing, quickly before we wrap up the show, is that I also want to see how Contreras plays at first base.
And I was going to say Luken Baker and Alec Burleson. That's the other question mark, because they both played very well. And a lot of people want Burleson here and want his bat. Well, like you said, if Arenado's here, that shifts Donnie to the outfield. Well, Burleson's probably in the outfield too, and then somebody's got a DH. So there's just a lot of question mark around those fringe type players, so to speak, of where do they fit and how do they fit everybody in.
The one thing we know is it's going to be fun to be down there and be actually watching baseball and talking about real baseball instead of what we've had to kind of sit here and go through all winter. We'll be waiting for everything. And plus, it's cold in St. Louis.
As I said today, I've seen the snow. I've felt the cold. It can go. It's time for baseball.
If you're planning the trip down to spring training, if this cold weather's got you looking forward to that, don't forget our party at the Homewood Suites. March the 11th is the date for that. 12 years or so that we've been doing that down there. So looking forward to that. I always have a couple of players around. Even if you can't make it down there that week for the party, don't forget they have a special STL Sports Page rate at that hotel. Of course, throughout the whole month of March. So get down there any point during the February or March. You can all the information on our spring training tab page on stlsportspage.com. And one thing we're excited about as we make the drive south this year is there's a new Drury Hotel in Chattanooga. So we're going to check that out on our way south, too. So, perfect spot for a stop on that first day of driving down. It'll be here before we know it.
It'll be here before we know it, and I think we're all excited.
But we'll have real Cardinal baseball to talk about. But there may be something happening between now and then as well. You never know. We know that they're talking, just not sure what the actual results of those talks are going to be. So when something happens, we'll, of course, have it all covered for you here on STLSportsPage.com. For Mike Raines, this is Rob Raines. Thanks for watching this edition of the Raines on the Cardinals podcast.